Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Enjoy Illinois 300 at Worldwide Technology Raceway here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway, Christopher Bell won the rain-shortened Coca-Cola 600. Now, we thought maybe they were going to get restarted. They didn't end up getting restarted. Kyle Larson didn't even get to turn a lap, even though he showed up just as the storms opened up. Did end up running the Indy 500 the whole race there. Unfortunately, got a pit road speeding penalty at Indy. And as a result, Justin Allgaier ran the whole race in the Coca-Cola 600 for Kyle Larson. But Stevie, thoughts on the Coca-Cola 600, NASCAR's decision to call it, thoughts on Kyle Larson doing the double or the Indy 500 or any of race day weekend?
First off, Indy 500, I thought was really solid. Like the passing at the front of that was just really fun to watch. And Larson, it felt like Larson started to figure it out. And I was really excited to see what was going to happen with Larson, and then he got the speeding penalty, and he's going to kick himself for a year for that one. Because it's not like NASCAR. Like, you can come back from a speeding penalty in NASCAR. You just can't come back from it in the Indy 500. But I thought the Indy 500 was fantastic. Monaco, those cars are too big for the F1 track there. I mean, you can't pass first through 10th, finish first through 10th or something. It was just wild.
4 passes and then, total, none of them for points.
I mean, Monaco in itself is just such a awesome race and place, but they're gonna have to figure something out because I mean, there's just no passing whatsoever. But as far as the Coke 600, I mean, the racing was phenomenal. I enjoyed it a lot. I hated the decision to call it. I was at Charlotte. I was hearing 15 minutes before they were gonna call drivers to cars, and I left probably around 12:30, 12:45 from the track, and the track wasn't that wet. So I don't know. I hated the decision to call it. I really did, because the racing was great, and we started to see some cars come alive, and I think we were gonna see a really good stage and a half. So I hated that. Love the racing. I mean, the racing at Charlotte is phenomenal right now with this car. We saw a lot of people come and go. We saw a lot of fast cars be able to pass. And when we were out there racing was great. But yeah, I mean, overall, the decision to call the race when they called the race, I think really kind of hurt how I feel about the race. And I hate that. But I mean, I like the on-track product. We'll call it that.
Yeah, no, I thought the on-track product was really good, and especially if you looked at the Xfinity race, for example. I mean, you could run any line on that track, and they were all about equal. So it wasn't like the top line was better. It wasn't like the bottom line was better. So that track has aged to the perfect spot where, pretty much any line you can run, wherever your car is handling best, and kind of almost where your competitors don't go, you go for that clean air. But I agree. I thought the Indy 500 was amazing. It was one of the best Indy 500s I've ever seen in my life, and I've been watching Indy 500 pretty much every year I've been alive. It was absolutely incredible. I was really bummed Colton Herta crashed because he had the best car. I don't think it was actually debatable. I think he had the best car. He drove from 13th all the way up to 2nd, pretty much with ease, and just total random fluke crash that ended up happening to him. I'm sure he's, like Larson, is kicking himself for that because, like you said, you don't get until another year to try the Indy 500 again. So very good race. Congrats to Joseph Newgarden on 2 consecutive victories. First time since 2001, 2002 in the Indy 500. And congrats to Christopher Bell on winning the longest race of the year. That wasn't actually the longest race of the year. And I thought it was funny. It ended up being 601 kilometers long. I don't know if you ever saw that, but so he kind of had the Coke 600. It was just 600 kilometers. But that is going to do it for racing weekend. A little bit of a bummer with how bad Monaco was, with the 600 getting rained out, and with the 500 on a long rain delay that had the last part of the 500 overlap with the start of the 600. So definitely a bummer of a motorsports Christmas. Hopefully next year's will be better. But we're here to talk about Worldwide Technology Raceway, aka Gateway. And Gateway is a 1.25 mile oval. It's pretty flatly banked. It's slightly egg shaped. So, there's a lot of potential things we could compare Gateway to. It kind of drives like a shorter, flatter track, but we use the intermediate package. So Gateway's pretty unique. Why don't we talk about racing at Gateway, Stevie? We've only had 2 races here so far, but what have they been like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to really expect this weekend as far as like what the racing is going to be like, because this package with this car and the newer cars, it just really hasn't produced a lot of passing on this type of track this year. And I don't know if we really expect it to produce a lot of passing. I mean, there was lead changes the first 2 years. We saw the winners come from the top 10 both years. Kyle Busch won from the pole last year, 10 plus cautions in both races here. We've seen the Xfinity series run here since like the late 90s, on and off, so what was the last time was like 2010 or something, right? For them. And then like the truck series has run here since the late 90s. And like a lot of the winning success has come from like the top 10 positions, with a lot of the success has come from the top 5 in those 2 series. So like anytime you see like a lot of success from like the top 5, I feel like it's going to be a track position race. So like you want track position, you want good pit road. And I mean, it really just for me, going into it as like, hey, it's going to be another track position race. And I feel like that's how I'm just going to approach short track racing pretty much for the rest of the year, until we do something with either the tire or the horsepower or something with this car, because what we did this offseason isn't working.
Yeah, it's definitely not working, and definitely I think is going to be a track position race. And you mentioned track position. If we look at the top 5 finishers in both the Gateway races, they are completely filled by the top 10 starting positions, other than 3 drivers started outside the top 10 and finished inside the top 5. So out of 10 possibilities, 70% of the top 10, of the top 5, I should say, has come from top 10 starters. Now it gets a little easier as you go further down the board, but certainly if you're to finish in the top 5, you really, really want to be starting. And I shouldn't even say just inside the top 10, but the top 8. 70% of the top 5 started inside the top 8. So qualifying going to be huge this weekend. But like I was talking about, Gateway, a little bit of a unique track, 1.25 miles. We don't have another track that's 1.25 miles long in the series. We don't have one that's this flat where we race the intermediate package, other than Pocono and Indy, but those are 2.5 mile tracks. Those are double the size of Gateway. We don't really, have the shorter tracks. You can't really completely compare them to, because they use the short track package. The bigger tracks you can't really compare it to because they're bigger. Darlington's about the same size. It's 1.25 miles. It's egg shaped, but it's steeply banked and super high tire wear. Like, how do we use comp tracks here at Gateway to build our sample size? Because we only have 2 Gateway races to use.
Well, Nashville is like what, 1.3 or something.
Yeah, one and a
And
third,
but
and
it's
like,
going to have a lot more tire wear than Gateway too. So like,
yeah,
I don't think there is a perfect comp. To answer your question, I don't think there is a perfect comp. I think you're going to use a little bit of Nashville. You're going to use a little bit of the short flat tracks that we've run this season, like Phoenix, Richmond. You go back and maybe look at some New Hampshire data from last year, the Gateway data from last year. But like, I don't think there is a perfect comp this week. I think you're going to look at a lot of like speed from Gateway. You're going to look at a lot of 2024 speed, because I mean, we just said it. We think this is going to be a track position race. So like, we want guys that are going to qualify fast. We want guys that can put down a lap. Like, we don't have. I can say this because I can see our sheet, but we don't have like Ty Gibbs in our picks this week. But he's been really good in qualifying all year. And if it's a track position race, maybe this is a Ty Gibbs week. So like, I think you're going to be looking at 2024 speed more than anything else, but then you're going to be looking at some of the stuff like I mentioned, some of these short flats, maybe a little Nashville, because Nashville is kind of similar to Gateway. It just has so much more tire wear that it's really hard to compare the two. But yeah, to answer your question, at the end of the day, I don't think there's a perfect comp.
you're right. No, there is no perfect comp, and for me, I think it's mostly Phoenix and Nashville are probably the 2 I'm using. And kind of look at like the combination of the 2, you get in that ballpark range. The only difference is these 2 tracks are both a little more banked than Worldwide Technology Raceway, than Gateway here. So that would be the main difference, is that they're they're both a little more banked, but not a ton, right? Like Gateway's banking is 11 and 9 degrees. Nashville, I think, is 14, and I think Phoenix is 11 in both sets of turns. So pretty similar in terms of banking in both, but yeah, just in size and then speed, Nashville, Phoenix, probably the two best comps. But you mentioned it. I think just current form is going to be pretty important, and we're kind of getting to that point where we've seen a little bit of shift in current form. Certainly, the Fords, we've talked about it on the last episode. Fords are kind of catching up, and it looked to kind of continue. They were pretty good. Keselowski may have had one of the cars to beat in that race, and Buescher would have been good if he didn't have to go to his backup car. Certainly, I think the Penske's were pretty competitive, et cetera, at even the 600, and we saw how Joey Logano won at North Wilkesboro in the All-Star race, which is a very short flat track. So yeah, I think this is going to be a spot where we can also rely a lot on current form. But any other intangibles? Any other thoughts about handicapping Gateway here?
Yeah, I mean, like after practice and qualifying, like qualifying's huge this week. It's a track position race, so like right when books like reopen, see if there's any value with the track position game. Is there anybody that like unexpectedly qualified like seventh that like could hold track position and get you like a top 10? Did somebody unexpectedly qualify in the top 3 and like have a chance to win the race, and they're at double digit odds? So I think qualifying and like as soon as books reopen, like NASCAR lines, I know I try to do it in the NASCAR Discord in Roto Grinders, and I know you're in the Action Discord trying to do the same thing. So, like, I think it's really important to pay attention to like numbers and lines after qualifying this week, because I think that's where you're going to find a lot of your value.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And like you said, qualifying being so important, if a book doesn't just enough, and usually the books over adjust after qualifying for qualifying, but this week might be a week where they don't, just because of how important track position could be here. But that is going to do it for the preview of this Enjoy Illinois 300. Now it's time to dive into our bets. So we're going to take you for a lap around Gateway. 4 turns, 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from myself per turn, before we, as usual, drive into victory lane. So we're going to throw the green flag on the Enjoy Illinois 300 and dive into turn 1. Okay, Stevie, turn 1. You and I are on a pair of minus odds top 10 picks here. What's yours?
Yeah, I mean, we don't love to pay the juice on this podcast, but I feel like these two you could definitely pay the juice and feel pretty good about. I mean, Kyle Busch, top 10, minus 135 is where I'm at with my turn 1 pick. And this just comes down to Kyle's been really good here. Like, he was really good here in the Joe Gibbs car. He was really good here last season in the RCR car. And it's speed, right? Like, it's just pure speed. And that's what we kind of want to look for this weekend when we're talking about a track position race, is like, can he qualify well enough to run up front? And like, he's just been the fastest car by a good margin here in the 2 races here with this next gen car. I mean, if we look at recent form, we're not going to love Kyle Busch, but I feel like this is just one of those things where they have a good setup, and he had a good setup with JGR here. He had a good setup here with RCR, and I think he's going to come with speed and unload with speed, and I think that's half the battle when you only get 20 minutes of practice. So Kyle Busch, top 10, minus 135. I'm like, you and I were talking about it pre-show. I was like, man, I'm going to kick myself for not betting like his outright this week if he has a lot of speed in qualifying, but like, mentally, I just like, he has been so rough. We'll call it rough this season, like, and just doesn't have the raw speed. So, yeah, gosh, if he qualifies in like the top 5, I'm gonna send Nick a message like with some kind of emoji or something. Like, but yeah, I got Kyle this week for a top 10 at minus 135.
Yeah, I like that. My model's really high on Kyle Busch's outright, but then it kind of like doesn't like his consistency, so it doesn't love his top 10 as much. So I think for me, if I were to play Kyle Busch, I might play something like a top 3 or top 5, because that outright does scare me a little bit with the price that it's at. But like, I think like a top 3 or top 5 would be maybe my favorite way to play Kyle Busch, simply because if he's good, he's going to be probably be really good, right? So I think even a top 5 is a spot you could take him here, but still don't mind at all the top 10 finish. It's just one of those, his consistency is a little questionable right now. But my turn 1 pick, I'm going to pay even more juice than you, sir. I'm going to go Martin Truex Jr. minus 190 for a top 10 finish. And you might be like, Come on, Nick. Why are we betting a minus 190 if you're listening to this podcast? Well, it's because it's technically value, right? Value is only what is this driver's probability of hitting this bet versus his implied odds of hitting the bet. And I have his probability, his fair odds at minus 230. So I have Truex actually even more likely to finish top 10 than his implied probability at minus 190, which is right around like 65, 66% there. So Martin Truex Jr., for me, is really good at this track. In 2022, he led 42 laps and he finished sixth. But the only reason he finished sixth was because he was on that last pit stop. His crew had second to last pit stop, I think it was. His crew had a really slow stop and it was just very difficult for them to recover. It's a track position race, like you said. 2023, he finished fifth. And that was despite the fact that a pit penalty dropped him to the rear of the field after he finished fourth in stage one. So despite a couple issues, he had, a fifth place finish and a sixth place finish, average finish 5.5. So without those issues, his underlying data would look even better. And I'd probably have fair odds on him at minus 250 without those issues, So I think minus 190 is just a little bit too short here, which is funny enough to say. So, or I should say too long at minus 190. It's a little too long. And I think the odds should be even shorter at minus 230. So I'm going to pay the juice. I'm going to take Martin Truex Jr. Top 10 finish.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say my thoughts for Martin Truex Jr. for turn two, because I'm on the Truex bandwagon with you, and value, whether it be minus 250 or plus 250, if you have value, you have value. So paying the juice sometimes when you have a lot of value is fine. Make plus EV bets.
Yeah, exactly. All we're trying to do is make plus EV bets, and it doesn't matter if it's, super long shots or even money or very minus odds. I always say the best bet I ever made was a minus 350 bet, and that was Floyd Mayweather did not get knocked down versus Conor McGregor. That was probably the easiest bet I've ever made and won in my life there. So it doesn't matter the odds as long as the odds of the thing actually happening are better than the implied probability that you're given with the odds. So turn one, a pair of top 10 bets. Kyle Busch, top 10, minus 135 for Stevie. Martin Truex Jr., minus 190 for me. And as Stevie mentioned, he'll be talking about Martin Truex Jr. as we roll turn two. Okay, turn two, Stevie. Now it's time to give your thoughts on MTJ.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with his outright here. So I just bet Ty Gibbs. So I've technically bet 4 outrights, but coming into the show I only bet 3 outrights. But in my head, I'm like, I gotta bet Ty Gibbs. But Martin Truex Jr. at 9-1 here to win this race. This is just a current form bet, right? If we look at the short flats for 2024, he's been the fastest in speed. So this is Martin Truex Jr. has been really good at this racetrack type in his career, and so is Denny Hamlin, but we're getting Martin Truex Jr. at a little bit better number than Denny Hamlin. So, I just kind of was looking at Truex and Hamlin and trying to find the best odds out of the two of them, and Truex actually had a little bit more value with his odds. So, that's what it all comes down to. I think those are the two cars to beat this weekend, Hamlin and Truex, and I think that Truex has a fantastic chance to be running up front and have a chance to win this race. If we look at just the short flats and even add in Nashville, this dude is going to be towards the front of this race for a majority of the race. He's really fast on this type of racetrack. So getting Truex at 9-1, this just kind of adds to your minus 190 for a top 10 here, but very, very high on Truex and JGR this weekend.
Yeah, I like Truex a lot. And I haven't bet his outright yet. I'm looking to, but the only reason I might not, and this could apply to the top 10 as well, I decided I wanted to take that Truex top 10. The only reason I haven't is his best starting position this year is 4th place. And he's qualified outside of the top 10 almost as much as he's qualified inside the top 10. And if he does that, he's going to lengthen, but he's not going to lengthen significantly in my model. I checked to see how much starting position weighs. And while it definitely will weigh some and would bring his odds down on my model, I think it'll bring the book odds down even more. And that'll give me a chance to bet Martin Truex Jr.'s outright, because right now, if I were to bet it, it would be pretty much break even. I have him almost exactly at 9-1 to win the race here. So, that's just my model. Your model's higher than on him. And I'm always a proponent, like I said, of model averaging. But I think this is just a spot where I'm going to wait Truex out in terms of his outright. See if I can get a squeeze out of 10 or 11 to 1, something like that. But I'm with you. Number 1 on my model, Denny Hamlin. Number 2 is actually the guy I'm going to bet in this turn. And number 3 is Martin Truex Jr. So let's talk about the guy that I am betting. My model is super high on this driver. And I changed my pick here because we moved my driver to victory lane. I forgot about that. Yeah, we got a little tire spin here in turn 2, getting off the turn a little funny. But we're going to save our victory lane pick for victory lane because I originally had this driver in turn 2. But actually, in turn 2, I'm going to go with Michael McDowell for a top 10 finish at plus 650. I like this bet a lot. I have fair value on this, under 5 to 1, closer to 4.5 to 1. And if we look at McDowell, his average finish at Gateway, 13.5, right? 13.5, and you're getting plus 650 for a top 10 finish. That already feels pretty nice. Also, earlier this year, he finished 8th at Phoenix, which is one of the more comparable tracks like we like to talk about for Gateway. So I definitely think this is a spot where Michael McDowell is just priced a little bit too long. If we look at that 22 Gateway race, he had an average running position of 11.27, which is 10th best among all drivers in that race. And, 1 or 2 of those drivers aren't in even racing right now. So Michael McDowell certainly has a chance to finish top 10 just based off speed from what we saw in 2022 and in 2023 at Gateway, where he wasn't quite as good, but still pretty solid. Ran in the teens most of the race. And overall, just speaking of, this team, it is on a roll. They finished 10th at Kansas, 10th at Darlington, and 16th at Charlotte in the last 3. Now, I know those are different tracks from Gateway, but they're all in the intermediate package, and Gateway is technically in the intermediate package. So if we look at McDowell, he's been getting results. That team has been performing recently. So I like Michael McDowell, top 10 finish plus 650.
Yeah, McDowell's been really good at qualifying this year. This team has had a lot of speed, and with Stewart Haas kind of, closing the doors at the end of the year, I think Ford's going to focus a lot on Penske and Front Row and Wood Brothers and stuff. So, I think it was a huge hit for Stewart Haas, and I think it's a really good thing for Front Row. They seem very committed, and give credit where credit's due. Mike McDowell, I really wish he was coming back to this car next year because I feel like they're going to have more Ford support, and I really wish that he was coming back, and we'll see how it all kind of plays out with him moving forward. But overall for me on McDowell, I like this, and if it is a track position race, they're so aggressive with their pit road strategy too that he's a guy that can catch a break and finish inside the top 5 because of how aggressive his crew chief is. So, yeah, I like this McDowell bet. I'm going to tail this one.
Yep, there we go. So, Martin Truex Jr. for Stevie in turn 2, 9 to 1 to win the race. For me, I'm going Michael McDowell, top 10 finish, 6.5 to 1. So those are our first 2 picks. We've run almost half the track. We're going down the backstretch. But before we get into turn 3, I want to remind you all Running Hot is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, 2 turns down, 2 turns to go. We are going to take another turn and dive into turn 3. Turn 3, Stevie. We're looking at a couple manufacturer spots, and they might not play exactly the nicest together, but we can still win both these bets. What's yours?
I'm going to go back to the one that we hit last week. Winning manufacturer Toyota at plus 140. Would have liked to see a different Toyota win last weekend, but hey, it is what it is. We'll take it. And Toyota plus 140 here. If we just look at the short flats this season, they've been the clear-cut top car. I think Kyle Larson is up there as well as far as speed, so you're a little concerned about that. But Truex ranks first, Hamlin ranks second, Christopher Bell ranks third, and then Tyler Reddick is 5th. So 4 of the top 5 cars on the short flats this season have been these Toyotas. They're just really fast with this racetrack type. They've been really fast with this intermediate package. And I mean, you look at like who's been good on short flats throughout the last like 5 to 10 years, and like again, Truex and Hamlin are going to be at the top of that list. So you're getting two of the best. And we've seen Bell run really well. We've seen Gibbs qualify really well. Bubba, I mean, Martinsville is one of Bubba's best tracks. So, like, another flat track. And then, again, Tyler Reddick is just good everywhere, it seems like. I think he's a future superstar. So, I like Toyota at plus 140 this week for the winning manufacturer.
Yeah, like you said, we're getting two of the best cars, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr. Christopher Bell, always a stud at short, flat tracks. And Tyler Reddick's been solid here. Ty Gibbs, this should be a good track for him. Bubba Wallace, probably a good track here for him. And even Eric Jones. Now, I know it's very small win, probably very, very small. But his track quality metric, when I talk about a driver's track quality metric, it's how well do they perform versus an average track for them. Eric Jones is sixth in my track quality metric. And, he's finished two solid finishes here, one inside the top 10, one outside the top 10 at Gateway. And this year at the shorter, flatter tracks, he's had finishes of 14, 14, and 12. So should be a good track for Eric Jones as well. And still very small win probably, but everything adds up when you're taking a winning manufacturer bet. So Stevie, Toyota plus 140 as the winning manufacturer. For me, I'm going to the blue ovals, and I'm going to take over 3.5 Fords in the top 10. You can get that at plus 150. And I love this bet. I really like this bet. This might be one of my favorite bets of the week. This is a spot where I think the Fords are going to shine. If we look at that track quality metric that I just mentioned, number one is Kyle Busch, who Stevie already talked about. 2, 3, and 4 are Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, and Austin Cindric, the Team Penske cars. So Penske has really figured it out here at Gateway. And then when we look at some other cars, obviously the RFK cars have really turned it up recently. So I expect Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher to be very strong here. And then we look at the Stewart-Haas racing cars. All four of their drivers are good at shorter, flatter tracks. Josh Berry, Noah Gragson, Chase Briscoe can get it done here. And Ryan Preece, this will be one of his better tracks that he sees throughout the season. We just talked about Michael McDowell top 10 finish. Todd Gilliland, I have value on his top 10, even though it's thinner. He should be pretty good here, and he's had a couple solid runs here at Gateway. So I think Ford could show up this weekend and put 4 cars inside the top 10. This has also been a spot where Hendrick Motorsports has not quite been there in terms of competition, right? We haven't seen Kyle Larson dominate here. We haven't seen William Byron really dominate here. Chase Elliott, for example. So definitely a spot where I like backing the Fords to have more than 3.5 cars in the top 10. And we're getting pretty solid plus money odds here at plus 150.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting note about Hendrick Motorsports this weekend. If we look at just speed, the only person in the top 10 out of those 4 cars in speed has been Larson, and he only has 3 fastest laps in 2 races here. So averaging 1.5 fastest laps in 2 races. So when you see that with Kyle Larson, you're like, all right, they obviously haven't figured this one out, because Larson is a guy that typically we're looking at 15 to 25 fastest laps per week, because the guy is just fast everywhere. So I think that's a great note about them. And really the only Chevy team that has kind of figured it out has been RCR, and it's been because of Kyle Busch. It's not Austin Dillon. So I like this. I told Nick, I was like, I wish this was available in Florida, because I like this one. I like Logano and Blaney a lot. You and I are both on Blaney this week. I like Logano a lot. I love the Cindric thoughts. I think Cindric has the upside to finish inside the top 10. And then you mentioned, the Stewart-Haas cars. How do you get the black eye off from this week? Well, you go out and finish inside the top 10. You have a good week and say, hey, we're still here, kind of thing. So, and all those drivers for Stewart-Haas, they're all auditioning for jobs now. They all are trying to get jobs for next year. So they're going to be pushing just as hard as ever to run well.
Yeah, absolutely. And real quick, let's do a sidebar on Stewart-Haas Racing. So it was announced 1 or 2 days ago, that Stewart-Haas Racing, this will be their last season in NASCAR. They're closing up shop. They have 4 charters. Obviously, they're going to sell off the 4 charters. One of them, it's been announced, is going to Front Row Motorsports. So Front Row Motorsports will expand to a 3-car team next year. The other 3 charter spots have not been announced, but it is widely speculated that one is going to go to Trackhouse Racing and one is going to go to 2311 Racing, with the 4th to be determined. So you kind of mentioned it. All 4 of these drivers, and not just the drivers, the crew chiefs, the pit crews, they're all auditioning for spots on maybe places where these charters open up, to continue working in NASCAR, maybe with other teams in the Cup Series. But also it could potentially turn into lame duck situations. How do you factor that in? Maybe not immediately, but what are some things you're looking for to see if maybe some drivers are okay with this, or if there ends up being some lame duck situation?
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like for the Stewart-Haas cars, they're going to be pushing as much as possible. And I think the announcement shocked a lot of people, but probably didn't shock as many people as we kind of think, because I mean, you listen to everything that Kevin Harvick has to say, on his podcast and stuff, and how involved was Stewart and Gene anyway, kind of thing. So, I mean, the fact that the 3 of the 4 charters have been bought, the 4th one will be bought. I did predictions earlier this week on where all the drivers were. I'm going to just tell you really quick because I want to hear your thoughts. But I have Briscoe going to the 21 car. I have Cole Custer going to one of the front row motor cars with Haas sponsoring Cole Custer. Gregson to the 48 car. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on that. And then I don't know if Priest is going to have a ride immediately. I think he's going to have to finish the season extremely strong to have a ride somewhere, because he doesn't have a lot of sponsorship backing and stuff. And then I think Barry's the really interesting one, because there's been talks of hey, does Junior Motorsports buy the Charger, type of thing. And I feel like he'd be the prime candidate over Justin Allgaier, to be honest, because he has a year in the car. So that's kind of my thoughts. Is I really do think Gregson to the 48 is probably my boldest prediction, but
Very
with
bold.
So my prediction, Nick, and I don't want to sidetrack the podcast too much, but my prediction is either Gregson or Hochevar is in the 48 car next year.
Yeah, I like that. And then Alex Bowman maybe back to Xfinity or a smaller team. Or
I think Bowman is a fantastic race car driver, but if you don't produce in a Hendrick Motorsports car, you're going to lose your ride.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I think I agree with your predictions. It sounds like Briscoe to the 21 is, well, it's not a done deal. It certainly seems like the favored avenue there. I personally think it would be cool if Briscoe went to 2311, but that seems like that spot is targeted for Corey Heim. But if for some reason Heim doesn't end up there, maybe we see Chase Briscoe there. I could definitely honestly see that happening. I think it'd be a great landing spot for Briscoe. Gregson, for me, I could see the 48 for sure. But I could also see him ending up in that front row motorsports ride as well, that extra charter there. So tough to say. And then Josh Berry and Ryan Preece, I don't have any strong opinions on either way. I'm excited to see what happens with those. But we got one more turn left, so let's get to our turn 4 picks. So once again, we're going to roll turn 3 into turn 4. All right, last turn here, Stevie. What do you got for us? Looks like another outright.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Coke 600 winner here, Christopher Bell at 10-1. His pit crew, we've talked about it, right? We finally saw it in action this past weekend at the Coke 600. They just won on pit road. I mean, they won consistently on pit road. Did Bell have the best car last week? I mean, it's tough to say. We would have needed the other 150 laps to pan out to see where everybody was at, but he had a really fast car. But his pit crew, man, they're on another level this year. And when we're talking about a track position race, we're going to be talking about pit crews, right? That's the thing. And he's been really fast at Richmond and Phoenix. Toyota's been really fast. And you're giving me a little bit of a bump here with his pit crew. So I'm going to go to Christopher Bell at 10-1. Again, I'm really high on Toyotas. We're going to have a Toyota week, and I'm going to make a lot of money. It's going to be nice for all the Toyota weeks that we haven't had. So I'm going to go to Bell at 10-1 here.
Yeah, I'm really kicking myself for not taking Bell last week. He was 15-1 out there midweek last week, and I wish I'd taken him, because we were talking about it on the pod, Stevie. It was 15-1, and well, I mean, we didn't say 15-1, but we were talking about how pit stops really could come into play in a 600-mile race where there's going to be at least 7 pit stops, and I did have some thin value at 15-1, but didn't end up taking it. I really should have. So back to the well for you here with Christopher Bell at 10-1 at Gateway. For me, I'm going to go a little funsy bet, Stevie, and it's not going to feel good, but bear with me here. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for a top 10 finish at 20-1. Why am I doing this? Well, first, I'm crazy. Yeah, we all know that. Second, I do like betting things where my model shows significant value, and my model does show significant value here. And the reason it does, third, is because last year, he spent every single lap that he ran inside the top 15 in this race, including over 60% of the laps inside the top 10. He had the 9th best average running position here last year. And the only reason he didn't get a good finish was because Austin Dillon and Austin Cindric got into a little pissing match and decided to not play nice on a late restart. One of them spun the other out, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was just an innocent bystander while he was trying to grab a top 10 spot there, which kind of goes to your Austin Cindric, point where he definitely has top 10 upside as well, because he was also just outside of the top 10 battling there. So, that backs up that Ford top 10 plus 150 bet that I have over 3.5 Fords. But Ricky Stenhouse Jr. here was one of the 10 best cars last year. So if setups are similar enough, if things are similar enough, if they're able to bring a car that's similar enough, we're getting 20-1 on a car that was top 10 last year. It didn't finish top 10, but was a top 10 car last year. That's bananas. That's my whole reasoning. That's literally it.
Yeah. So I don't hate this one. I like Stenhouse as a driver. I think he's super aggressive. I don't like him on short flats. Like, that's not my thing for him. But again, we tinker with, like, is this a short flat? Is it not a short flat? Like, it has more. It's not like a 0.75 mile track. It's not a half a mile track. Like, so I mean, I go back and forth on how I want to do it, but yeah, I mean, I don't hate this. Getting it at this number, it's a funsy bet, right? Like, that's all it is. And like, you have reasoning behind your funsy bet. You're not just saying, hey, I'm just throwing I'm just throwing money at 20-1 here.
Yeah, well, and let's remember Ricky Stenhouse Jr. last year also did have some good short flat runs, even though he maybe didn't have the results. Richmond, he was running inside the top 10. Richmond ran inside the top 10, even inside the top 5 or 7, up until I think his tire blew or something like that. It was something that happened that, or loose wheel maybe that happened. He finished 8th at Martinsville 1 last year. So it's not like he's horrible at short flats. He definitely can have some good runs. And this is like you said, it's kind of intermediate short flat. So if we look at his Nashville results, right, he finished 6th at Nashville in 2021. So it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility, I would say, that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has a car that is capable of pushing a top 10 finish. And if he has that piece from last year, 20-1 is just ridiculous. So a little funsy sprinkle bet, something like a quarter unit on Ricky Stenhouse Jr. top 10 finish at 20-1. But there is only one thing left to do now that we've completed the lap around Worldwide Technology Gateway Raceway, and we got to drive into victory lane. So I almost gave it away earlier in one of the turns, but Stevie, I'll kick it off here since this was originally my turn to pick, and we're gonna go Ryan Blaney 9-1 for our victory lane pick to win the race. When we talked about my track quality metric, Ryan Blaney is second best in track quality, so how good he is above his own average, and his own average is already really high. I mean, he's defending Cup Series champion. So when we talk about track quality, Ryan Blaney being second best here, this is a very, very strong track for him. His average finish at Gateway, 5.0, with finishes of 4th and 6th place. He's combined led 95 laps in the 2 races, leading at least 12 in both, which means the only other one he dominated led something like 72 or 3 laps. He has 70 fastest laps in the 2 races and pretty consistent in those 38 and 32 fastest laps in each one. So consistently fast here at Gateway. And if we talk about comparable tracks, Phoenix is right up there as one of the best comparable tracks for Gateway. And Blaney is the driver to beat at Phoenix these days. He really is. I mean, a bunch of top 2 finishes, a win, 5th earlier this year. He's been absolutely dominant at Phoenix, which is one of the best comparable tracks for Gateway. He's always been great at Martinsville, which is, very short but flatter like Gateway is. So got a lot of reasons here to like Blaney, plus, kind of forward on that comeback trail.
If the Toyota doesn't win this week, I hope it's Ryan Blaney. I mean, it's as simple as that for me. I like Blaney a lot, and I think he's going to be really fast. He's been really fast at this racetrack, and like you mentioned about Phoenix, like this is like at the end of the day, like if Toyota doesn't win, I'm going to be hurting because I'm very betting focused on Toyota. But Blaney will probably get me close to break even if he wins. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like Blaney is my Toyota hedge. I'm very much on the Ryan Blaney train with you this week. Love the speed. And I mean, again, just coming into this race, I feel like he's going to be up there. He's going to compete, and he's good at qualifying. And like, I think the one thing that like we should think about too is like Logano. Mm-hmm. As good as Logano has been at qualifying this week or this season, like Logano is probably going to start inside the top 5 too. So, I mean, if you really want a Toyota hedge, you could go Logano and Blaney here, and I don't hate that. But you're kind of doing that with your Fords in the top 10 bet from turn 3. So, yeah, like Ryan Blaney, like this potential, and hopefully we get a good race. I really do hope that it's a good race.
Yeah, I hope it's a good race too. Questionable if it will be with the potential aero blocking that goes on with this car and this type of track and all that. So we'll see. But either way, hey, we got cars on track this weekend. I'm excited for that. IndyCar is going to be at Detroit. That is going to be an amazing race. If you have a chance to watch the IndyCar race at Detroit, highly suggest you do so. It was just the bananas race last year. And hopefully good momentum off the Indy 500 for that series as well. But that is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Enjoy Illinois 300 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's Motorsports Betting Podcast. We'll be back this time next week as we talk bets for the Toyota Save Mart 350 at Sonoma Raceway. We'll be back road course racing here. So on behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening. We'll see you back next week on Running Hot from Action Network.